Hello, welcome to Elizabeth Reads. We are on Jemima Small versus the Universe, Chapter 41, Stardust. I was sitting at the side of the lake at Camp Go Wild with my towel wrapped around me, half freezing. I told Frankie, our team leader, that I couldn't swim. She didn't believe me. She already had a list of non-confident swimmers, apparently. She told me I'd regret it later, that I wouldn't be cold in the water because a wetsuit's insulation would keep me warm. But I already knew that. Anyway, I'd been told when I was putting it on in the changing rooms that I didn't need one because my blubber would keep me warm. I looked over at the lake. Everyone was playing water polo with a giant ball and hula hoops for goals. Whoops and cheers and screams and laughter carried over on the wind. "You sure you don't want to join in?" Frankie shouted from the water. Her hand was over her eyes, shielding them from the sun. You could make out almost every muscle in her arm. I shook my head. Nothing could convince me to let the whole of Year 8 see me in skin-tight neoprene. I spotted Heidi's head in the water. I wished I hadn't been so slow getting my wetsuit on. Then I could have gone in with her. I took my phone out of my bag. Still no signal. This whole campsite was from the Stone Age. I checked the grass for cowpats, then lay down and looked up at the thick clouds. I doubted I'd even be able to see any stars later. Borrowing Jasper's binoculars had been a waste of time. I wondered if he'd even realized I'd taken them. "Jemima!" Gina, the last person I wanted to see. She probably looked like a goddess even in a wetsuit. She could never understand how I felt. I stayed lying down, looking up the clouds. "Why aren't you playing?" I decided to keep it vague. "I don't feel very well." "Oh," she said, and I heard her walk onto the wooden deck next to the lake. I didn't move, just watched the clouds forming different shapes in the sky. "Not well, huh? I used to say that anytime someone invited me to swim," she said. I lifted my head and propped myself up on my arms. She was sitting on the edge of the deck with her feet dangling in the water. Now, I couldn't care less if people stare or give me those second glances or nudge their friend to point me out because I loved swimming. If they don't like what they see, that's their problem. I sat up so I could see her properly. "Why would people do that to you? Your body's perfect." She turned round and smiled. "Thanks, Jemima. That's exactly how I feel about it too. But some people do like to stare at my leg." She swiveled her legs out of the water. She was wearing a thigh-length wetsuit, and on her right leg below her knee there was a turquoise prosthetic. It was patterned like the scales of a mermaid. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it before. Gina smiled like she was reading my mind. "My usual one is a bit more subtle. This is my aqualim. It's water-resistant." She stretched out her legs and turned her face to the sky. "It is a pretty cool prosthetic. Maybe that's why people stare." I smiled. "Because of the mermaid scales?" "Exactly," Gina laughed. "They could be jealous. It's a lot more interesting to look at than boring old skin." She walked over and sat next to me on the grass. "You know, Jemima, some people spend their entire lives not doing the things they want because they're worried about what other people think. But you know what really matters? What people think?" "No." Gina tipped her head back and laughed, a laugh that came all the way from her belly. It was sort of infectious. "What matters the most is what you think about yourself. Am I going to not wear a swimming costume or shorts in the summer because a few people might stare at my prosthetic? Am I going to believe I should hide myself away?" I shrugged and looked out at the lake. "Maybe." "No, Jemima," she said. "I'm not going to think like that. There are enough barriers in place for someone like me. I'm not going to add even more." She looked out at the waves splashing against the wooden deck. "I used to hate people staring, when I was younger. But now if people stare at me because my body doesn't look exactly like theirs, then good." "Good?" I said. "How can people staring be good?" Gina fixed her eyes on me. "Because it reminds me that I'm no longer hiding away. I'm not avoiding doing the things I love, like swimming, just because of what my leg looks like. I don't put limits on what I can do because of what other people think of my body. Not anymore. I focus on how my body feels, to me. So those looks I get sometimes, they remind me that I decided not to be invisible." She stared at me for a moment. "Our bodies share the same elements as stars, Jemima. We are literally made of stardust. But you already knew that, right?" As she said that, a huge cheer came from the lake. "Looks like they've scored." She stood up and walked onto the deck. "I know you're smart, Jemima. You're a brainiac now. So, if you want to spend your life sitting on the sidelines, hiding your body in a Spider-Man towel, that's up to you. But from here, it looks like our team's losing." She tapped her finger on her lip. "If only we had someone on our team who could shoot." It took me about 10 seconds to make up my mind. I made a much bigger splash jumping into the lake than Gina. But then my team were 7 goals down, so they kind of needed someone to make a big splash. When Frankie blew the whistle for the end of the game, we were 2 goals up, 6 of them scored by me. It's called deciding not to be invisible. Later, in the changing rooms, drying myself on literally the most embarrassing towel Dad could have found in the airing cupboard, I thought about what Gina had said, and I thought about the stars, how they're held together by their own gravity. The biggest kind of star is a hypergiant. They're the rarest type of star too, and the brightest thing out of everything that exists in the universe. I looked at my body in the mirror. Maybe I just got a little bit of extra stardust. That's the end of chapter 41. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.